Hey everyone, how you doing? So as you can see, I'm all dressed up, and the reason is because I just came off an interview with Fox News. And the reason why they interviewed me is because I posted a clip yesterday of SNL along with some commentary, and it went absolutely viral. So I want to share a little bit of the background on the clip, the congressional hearing that the clip was about, and why it went viral. And to do that, I want to go back to essentially a couple events that occurred, right? So you basically, within the past week, we have the worst congressional hearing in U.S. history, where the presidents of Penn, Harvard, and MIT refused to essentially say that calling for the genocide of the Jewish people is considered to be a violation of their rules of bullying and harassment. And then we have SNL choosing, instead of focusing on how embarrassing that was, they essentially focused on Elise Stefanik, the person who interviewed them, and tried to make fun of her. And that was the most embarrassing failure of what comedy is supposed to be, and it represents a much bigger problem. So let's go back to the fundamentals. Why is this happening? Why did SNL do that? Why is there such a backlash? And why am I talking about it? So essentially, it gets back to the fundamentals of postmodernism. So postmodernism is something which I spent years not really addressing and talking about, but it's about time that someone, especially someone in the Jewish world, actually expressed the fundamentals and why it's so problematic and what is essentially behind everything that we're seeing playing out in the public arena, especially the past couple months. So postmodernism is the fundamental philosophy that we have ascended past the need for religion, for tradition, for any real truth. We are so brilliant that we've realized there is no truth. We're just evolved matter and nothing matters. And essentially all that we really need to do in life is whatever we want to do. There's no such thing as reality, as truth, and any meta structure is a human construct, and nothing is real. And therefore, do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want. There is no truth. Now, that is the fundamental premise and why the whole transgender movement has been pushed. Because what that movement basically suggests is that there is no truth. There's no male, there's no female, there's nothing that's real. You can be whoever you want to be, whenever you want to be. You can identify however you want to identify. And essentially, everything that we know to be true is no longer true. And that's why it's been pushed as an agenda. Because the people who are, so to speak, the thinkers of the generation, they create an agenda that's pushed. Now, the people who believe in this, they control the universities, they control Hollywood, they control the public press and public media and the liberal media. And that's why for the past 10 years, they have been weaponizing speech, which essentially, if you think about the hierarchy of conduct, right? You have a thought in your head, no one sees that. You can't offend someone with your thoughts because it's not expressed. And then you can verbalize your thoughts, your ideas, in the realm of speech. That's not nearly as concrete as an action, right? When you speak something to someone, it's not the same thing as punching them in the face, but it can be hurtful. So if you call someone by a name they don't like, or you see something offensive, it can hurt someone's feelings. Now, the transgender movement weaponized speech by saying you have to call people by the pronouns that they want to be called, which is a game that cannot be played because people can identify however they want to identify, whenever they want to identify by it. So the people who are being accused of wrongful speech don't know how to play the game, but that's not the point. The point is that in order to push this idea of breaking down all truth, we weaponize speech, so you have to play by the rules. And then what that means is what you say is a concrete micro-offense, meaning what you say matters. You don't have to express it in conduct. You don't have to express it in action. Just the speech itself is wrong. Now, there's hypocrisy behind that because the whole essence of postmodernism is that there is no wrong or right. There is no truth. So therefore, essentially, there really is no such thing as doing something wrong, because there is no right and wrong. But we don't have to get into that hypocrisy. The real hypocrisies were just played out in Congress last week. It was the most hilarious hypocrisy and reversal of the entire agenda of the left for the past 10 years, which is that speech is an offense. Speech is real. It doesn't have to be expressed in action. The speech itself is wrong. Hate speech is what is emotionally received as being offensive. And then the presidents of MIT, Harvard, and Penn were asked a very simple question. If someone is screaming Intifada, Intifada, and screaming death to the Jews and calling for the genocide of the Jewish people, is that an offense? Is that harassment? Is that bullying? Now, if it was in the transgender arena, without a question, that person would be canceled, would be obliterated, and you'd never hear them again. When it comes to death of Jewish people, all of a sudden, now why is, but first, before we get to their answer, why has the entire liberal world essentially demonized Israel and basically identified them as an apartheid state and as someone who's creating the genocide of the entire Palestinian people? Why have they equated Hamas with the Palestinians? Because Israel represents the worst nightmare of the West. The West, in terms of where the liberals and the radical left wants to go, is an atheistic, godless, truthless reality. That's a postmodern world where you live the utopian life that you can with the limited time you have in this world, because there is no afterlife. That's a fairy tale that religions have fed you. And you need to wake up to the fact that you have a couple years in this world, live it the way you want to be. Don't mess with other people. That's a basic legal, practical system of law, not based on truth, but based on pragmatism, so that you can live and let live. And that's essentially the world that we live in. Israel represents the worst nightmare, which is a religious democracy. So the agenda of the day moved from transgenderism to Israel is evil, because Israel is the worst nightmare, which is what if America becomes a religious democracy? What if America becomes someone who actually cares about the truth again? We can't have that. So let's take control of the universities, of liberal media, CNN, BBC, and Hollywood, and let's make the entire world demonize Israel. So now you have on Congress a very simple question. Is calling for the death of the Jewish people a violation of speech, of harassment, of bullying? And what do they say? It depends on the context, and it has to turn into conduct. Meaning what? That speech, speech is not real anymore. It has to be implemented, expressed, has to be actualized. Wait a second, but for the past 10 years, you said it doesn't need to be expressed. For the past 10 years, you said that speech itself is real when it came to what you were pushing, your agenda. All of a sudden, the agenda no longer fits because you have to demonize Israel, but you then need to unweaponize speech. And it was called out and shown for the world to see. And what is comedy? SNL was given the opportunity to be true comedy. Comedy at its heart and soul is calling out the hypocrisy of the world and saying things that are a layer deeper than surface reality, calling out things as they are, calling out the truth. And that's why we laugh. We say, that's ridiculous. Meaning what happened in Congress was the funniest thing on a meta comedic level, and SNL had the opportunity to be actually funny and to call out the left for the absolute hypocrisy they represent. But what do? They're just a megaphone for the left, so they can't call out what's actually funny. And what's funny is that they did the most unfunny thing in comedic history, which is they tried to make fun of the person who was actually asking the question and saying, is this okay for everyone to be anti-Semitic? And they tried to make her look bad, and there was such a backlash and a pushback, because if you think about it, you know that a country and a society is dead when comedy is not allowed to express itself. In the times of old, if the jester was allowed to say things that were funny, you knew that a society would function. But if a jester said something that was funny and the dictator or the tyrant basically cut off his head, it means you're not allowed to speak. You're not allowed to call out things for as they are. So the postmodernists were fighting for truth, but then they created a closed door of this is the truth. Anything outside of this narrative is now not true. And by essentially rejecting what was old, they created a new structure that anything that rejects their structure narrative is deemed to be absolute, invalid on the most fundamental level. So what you have is a weaponization of comedy. Meaning instead of weaponizing speech, we unweaponize speech. We say that you can basically say whatever you want now, because now that fits our agenda. And they took SNL and made it just a microphone for their agenda, and the world saw. The world saw the most despicable expression of standing behind anti-Semitism and basically saying anti-Semitism is okay because we're trying to destroy Israel. And the world said, no, it's not. And you guys are a bunch of liars. You basically just manipulate the truth to fit what you want to express. And SNL, it's actually funny how unfunny that was. And our interview that we just had on Fox News will be airing soon, but that's why you see I'm a little bit dressed up for this video that I just made with you. But I just wanted to share with you the brilliance of seeing the fallacy behind people who think that they're brilliant, and the alt-left are basically now the ultimate anti-Semites, and we're not going to stand up for it. We are going to stand up for the truth, and that is the essence of Hanukkah, is being a light in that darkness and standing up for what we believe in.